I'm 76 years old, and I finally understand why silence destroyed my marriage. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't some dramatic ending that neighbors whispered about. It was the quiet. I'm telling you this now because there isn't much time left for me to pretend I don't know the truth. When you get to my age, you start seeing your life in longer stretches. Decades don't feel like decades anymore. They feel like a handful of decisions you kept repeating. And I kept choosing silence. My wife, Margaret, has been gone for 3 years now. Cancer. The kind that moves quickly once it decides to. In those last weeks, there were things she said with her eyes that she didn't have the strength to say out loud. I recognized that look. It was the same look she'd given me for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. We married young. I was 24, she was 22. We didn't have much. A small rented house with drafty windows and a kitchen that smelled faintly of gas no matter how many times I checked the stove. I worked at a manufacturing plant. Long shifts. Overtime whenever they offered it. It felt like the responsible thing to do. That's what husbands did. You worked. You provided. You didn't complain. Margaret stayed home at first. Later she took part-time work at the library once the kids started school. She liked books. She liked quiet spaces. That should have told me something. In the beginning, we talked. Not about deep things, maybe, but we talked. About money. About what color to paint the bedroom. About whether we could afford a second-hand car. We'd sit at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep and just go over the day. Then life filled up. There were bills. Repairs. School forms. My job became more demanding. I was promoted to a supervisory role in my late 30s. I remember feeling proud. I thought, this is what success looks like. But promotions come with weight. I carried that weight home. Margaret would ask, "How was your day?" And I'd say, "Fine." That was my word. Fine. If something bothered me at work, I kept it to myself. If I was tired, I didn't say it. If I was worried about money, I didn't tell her. I believed I was protecting her. I thought a good husband absorbed the stress so his family didn't have to feel it. What I didn't understand is that silence doesn't protect anyone. It just builds walls. She would try sometimes. "I feel like we don't talk anymore," she said once, probably in our early 40s. The kids were teenagers by then. Always out, always loud when they were home. I remember shrugging. "We talk. We talk about schedules," she said quietly. "Not about us." I didn't know what to do with that. It felt like criticism. And I didn't handle criticism well. So I shut down. I told myself she was being dramatic. That's the thing about silence. It feels safe in the moment. It feels like control. If you don't say the wrong thing, you can't make it worse. But not saying anything is its own kind of damage. Over time, our conversations became practical. Did you pay the electric bill? Can you pick up milk? The car needs servicing. The dentist appointment is Tuesday. We functioned well. From the outside, we were steady. No scandals. No loud fights. We hosted holidays. We attended weddings. We posed for photographs with polite smiles. I thought that meant we were fine. There were small moments I ignored. She stopped telling me about the books she was reading. At first she'd try. "There's this character who reminds me of," and I'd half listen, nodding while watching the evening news. Eventually she stopped trying. She started going on long walks alone in the evenings. I assumed she wanted exercise. Maybe she wanted air. Now I think she wanted space where she didn't feel invisible. In our 50s, the house got quieter. The kids moved out one by one. I remember standing in the doorway of our son's empty room and feeling a strange panic. The noise was gone. The distraction was gone. It was just us again. Margaret suggested we take a trip. "Just the two of us," she said, "like we used to talk about." I said work was busy. Maybe next year. There was always a next year in my mind. Retirement would come. Things would slow down. We'd have time then. Time. I treated it like something stored in a back room. Untouched. Guaranteed. Instead, we settled into a pattern of parallel lives. We ate dinner together, but often in silence. Not angry silence. Just tired silence. Sometimes she would start a sentence and then stop. I noticed that. I never asked why. In my early 60s, I finally retired. They gave me a small plaque and a handshake. I drove home that day expecting to feel lighter. Instead, I felt useless. Margaret had built a life around her routines. The library, her walking group, volunteer work at the church. She had friends I barely knew. I realized I didn't really know her days anymore. We were in the same house all the time, but I didn't know what she thought about when she lay awake at night. I didn't know what she feared. I didn't know what she still hoped for. One evening, not long after I retired, she said, "Do you ever think about how we got here?" "Here where?" I asked. "Just here." I made a joke. Something about getting old. She didn't laugh. That was probably the moment I could have turned toward her instead of away. I could have asked what she meant. I could have said I was scared too, that I didn't know how to be a husband without a job to hide behind. But vulnerability felt foreign. So I let the conversation die. The turning point wasn't loud. It was a doctor's office. She had been feeling tired for months. I assumed it was age. We both were slowing down. Then came the tests, the waiting, the phone call asking us to come in. I remember the way her hand felt in mine in that sterile room. The doctor spoke carefully. Stage 4. Aggressive. I watched her face as she listened. Too calm. On the drive home, she stared out the window. I kept both hands on the wheel. I wanted to say something strong, something reassuring. But all I managed was, "We'll get through this." We didn't. Chemotherapy changed her. Took her hair. Took her strength. Took the quiet independence she had carved out for herself. I sat beside her through appointments. I made soup. I handled medications. I did the things a husband is supposed to do. But there were words still trapped in my throat. One night, near the end, she was awake in the dark. I could hear her breathing, thin, uneven. She said, "I wish we had talked more." It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was tired. I felt something crack inside me. "We talked," I said, and even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. "We lived together," she whispered. "But you were always somewhere else." I didn't defend myself. I couldn't. She died 2 weeks later. The house after that was unbearable. Every room echoed. Her books were still on the shelves. Her coat still hung by the door. I found one of her journals months later. I hadn't known she kept one. I hesitated before opening it. It felt private. But I read it. There were no dramatic confessions inside. Just small entries. Notes about her day. About the weather. About the kids calling. About me. "John seemed far away tonight." One entry said, "I don't know how to reach him." Another, "I miss him, even when he's sitting next to me." That's what silence does. It makes someone lonely in your presence. There is no fixing that now. No grand apology can travel back 30 years. No conversation can be retroactively had. What's gone is gone. I can't sit at that kitchen table in 1989 and choose differently. I can't look at her in 2003 and say, "Tell me what you're afraid of." I can't accept that trip in our 50s and see what might have shifted. All I have is this quiet house and the understanding that love is not maintained by duty alone. If you're listening to me, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't have the right to instruct anyone. I will just tell you what I know now. Silence feels harmless. It feels mature, controlled, strong. But over years, it becomes distance. And distance becomes a kind of strangerhood. You wake up beside someone you chose, and you realize you don't fully know them anymore. And they don't know you. You assume there will be time to say the important things, to explain your fears, to admit your weaknesses, to ask the questions that feel awkward. You assume love can wait. It can't. It doesn't die in one dramatic moment. It erodes, quietly, politely. I loved my wife. I never doubted that. I worked hard for her. I stayed faithful. I came home every night. But I did not let her see me. Not fully. And I did not truly see her. That is the part that keeps me awake now. At 76, mornings arrive faster than they used to. My body reminds me that I am not permanent. I make my coffee. I sit in the same chair. The house is still. Sometimes I speak out loud, just to hear a voice in the room. If this means something to you, if you're sitting at a table tonight across from someone you've known for years, maybe just ask them something real. Not about schedules. Not about errands. Something real. And then stay quiet long enough to hear the answer. I don't say that as advice. I say it as a man who thought he had time. I thought there would always be another evening. Another year. Another chance to open my mouth and let the truth out. There wasn't. Now all I can do is remember the sound of her voice in the dark saying she wished we had talked more. I wish we had too. At 76, that's the heaviest thing I carry. And it doesn't get lighter.